Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Planning Control Committee, 12th February 2026 at 6 o'clock. Smack on. Happy New Year, everybody, because we didn't have the January meeting. So, yes, I know it just seems a bit long-winded, but Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome, welcome. Apologies. Stephen?
Chair, Councillor Amin. Thank you.
Thank you. We haven't got Councillor Now as yet. Heard from him? He's waiting for a taxi. Thank you very much, Sarah. Started with, it's just dropped him off. Is he? He's coming in. Any late items? There are none. Item 3, declarations of interest. Anybody? No. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December 2025. Thank you very much, Councillor Bolton. Item 5, minutes of the meeting of the Heritage and Conservation Advisory Committee. Thank you very much. Appeal decisions. Is that you, Ian?
Correct, Jerry. Chair. Thank you. Just a couple to choose from tonight. The first one was an appeal against the refusal of consent to Crown Lift. When St Cuthbert's Road, James. Yeah, sorry, the first one, 34 St Cuthbert's Road, it's an interesting decision. It's one that we debated at committee, and it involved the change of use to a care facility, and it's the one where we attached the time limit condition, restricting it to 1 year. They appealed 4 conditions in total relating to the other component, cycle parking management plan, which we'd used before and had endorsed down at Cortland Gardens. And the control of the number of children to be accommodated in the property. So those 3 conditions, the inspector was satisfied that they met the 6 tests. But in terms of the temporary permission, he felt the inspector felt that it didn't. So scratch that one off, and it's got a full 3-year permission for implementation. So that's one just to take on the chin, but it's very, very useful if we come across that scenario in the future and we go, I'd suggest we don't go down that route. Again, that's been firmly considered by an inspector and considered to be an unreasonable proposition. So we'll take that one on the chin, Chair. Second one, 35 Park Road, Spondon. Our colleague Andy Sherville was presented with a TPO application to Crown reduce these specimens that were covered by an order and have been covered by an order for nearly 25 years. The inspector took a reasoned and good overall consideration of the context, quite a nice leafy setting, and felt that they provided a positive contribution to the street scene, and so felt that our decision was sound. And Andy's judgment was sound and supported our decision, and they're always useful decisions to have because they are silver birch trees and sometimes possibly don't get the attention they deserve. So happy to take any questions on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. You got away with that one. Item 7, development control performance.
Yeah, nothing to add on that, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Application to be considered, item 8. Item 8.1, 14 Winton Avenue. Changing presenting officer, it's Mr. Woodhead again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You've received updated papers on the housing land supply position in part 6.2 of the report. That was taken from an old, outdated version, so apologies for that being included in the papers. And I've got nothing else to add to the report, Chair, and we'll pass over to the speakers. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Who wants to go first? Alan? Councillor Graves? Kirk? You want to go first? Alan? You've got 3 minutes, Alan.
Okay, thank you. This property, I want to speak quickly, sits within our Article 4 direction area. That direction was introduced precisely because this part of Alveston is already experiencing an over-concentration of HMOs. The purpose of Article 4 is to allow the Council to properly assess and, where necessary, resist further intensification where it would harm the character, balance and amenity of an area. Please ask yourselves, if not here, where does Article 4 actually have a meaning? Saved policy GD5 amenity requires that development must not cause unacceptable harm to the amenity of nearby areas, including through noise, disturbance, traffic generation and parking pressure. There are 60 resident objections demonstrating the reflective lived experience of cumulative impact. Officers state that a 6-person HMO is no different from a family home. With respect, that is not how these properties function. 6 unrelated adults, each with independent lifestyles, comings and goings, visitors and shift patterns generate a materially different pattern of activity from a single household. The cumulative impact in an already saturated street is real. Policy H13, residential development, general criteria, requires development to respect the character of the area. Policy CP3, placemaking principles, and CP4, character and context, require development to contribute positively to local character and create high-quality places. The continued erosion of family housing in the centre of an established residential neighbourhood undermines those aims. This street was built as family housing. Its long-term sustainability depends on maintaining that balance. Officers also rely heavily on the 5-year housing land supply shortfall, paragraph 11D of the NPPF. Please remember that the titled balance does not mean automatic approval. Paragraph 11D2 is clear. Permission should be refused where adverse impact significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits. The Highway Authority refers to paragraph 116 of the NPPF, stating refusal should only occur where impacts are severe. But members should note that parking stress and residential amenity fall squarely within planning judgment under GD5 and CP23, not merely highway safety. This committee must also consider cumulative impact. The fact that previous HMOs exist does not justify further harm. At some point, a tipping point is reached. Article 4 was introduced because this area is already oversupplied. Approving yet another HMO risks rendering that direction meaningless and undermining public confidence in the planning system. For these reasons, conflict with policies GD5, H13, CP3 and CP4 failures to properly address cumulative impact and harm to the established family character of the area. I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. Do you want to come back on any of those points here?
No, thank you, Chair, not presently.
Councillor Cuss, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asking the committee to refuse this application. This property sits in the Article 4 area, which the government approved so that the council could control the over-concentration of HMOs, especially in this area, such as these areas around Winton Avenue and Brighton Road. Residents can already see the impact, the continual loss of family homes, disruption to local character and pressures on the community. A big concern is parking and traffic. On-street parking is already a huge problem because many nearby homes have little or no off-street parking. The officer's report relies on parking research from 2007, but car ownership and real-world conditions have moved on. A 6-person HMO already brings more deliveries, visitors and day-to-day trips, adding to the congestion, particularly in this location opposite the shop and en route to the combination pub. As ward councillors, we have repeatedly raised Brighton Road and 7th Street as a key junction protection point, and highways have acknowledged parking is a known problem in this area. These were all documented from a few years ago in our local transport plans. Another concern is the interior layout. One of the bedrooms is excluded from the shared dining space requirement because it is 12 metres squared. However, it is unclear how this will be enforced in practice. Is it just simply an exclusion in name only, so that the dining room only needs to be accommodated for 5 people and can therefore be smaller to satisfy the council standards? As proposed, the dining room only just meets the requirement for 5 people, and if a 6th person were to use it, it would not meet the requirements. Finally, I urge you to listen to the strength of local feelings. 62 residents have objected individually. That level of opposition is exceptional and it reflects the real pressures in this area. Approving yet another HMO here would worsen parking pressure, traffic congestion and the broader harm caused by over-concentration. For these reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. Ian, anything from you?
Nothing so far, Chair.
We shall go
Got
to the
applicant.
committee for any...
Got the applicant, Chair, sorry.
Oh, sorry, we have got the applicant. I do apologise, sir. I do apologise. You have 3 minutes, sir. You do, yeah.
Great, thank you. So, Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I want to begin by saying I respect the planning process and the role of this committee. My intention here is not to challenge that process, but to focus the discussion on the planning merits and to explain briefly and personally why this proposal matters. The application was assessed by the Council's planning officers and recommended for approval because it meets all relevant planning policy and technical standards. The supporting statement from my architectural designer provides further context. My purpose this evening is to simply reassure the members of and the public that this proposal has been thought through carefully and responsibly and designed to avoid harm to neighbours or the wider area. I would like to acknowledge briefly and respectfully that why the application is before the committee. It's not due to any identified planning harm, but following a public social media lobbying campaign led by a councillor which encouraged significant objections and used language that I found personally distressing. I raise this only because to ask the committee to look past that noise and focus on the planning considerations alone, which I can tackle one by one. Turning to the proposal itself, the application seeks permission for a 6-bedroom HMO which complies with the Article 4 direction, avoids overconcentration, provides off-street parking and is designed to sit comfortably with the character of the area. My intention for the property is very clear. It's not speculative or unmanaged, and it's not about maximising numbers. It's about providing good quality, affordable accommodation for young professionals, apprentices and graduates starting their working lives in Derby. Derby's major employers, as we all know, including Rolls-Royce, Alstom, Toyota, Network Rail and others, continue to bring new people into the city every year. Many are in early careers and need flexible, affordable housing close to work. Well-managed share housing plays an important role in supporting the workforce and our local economy. Alveston sits directly within this employment corridor. The property is walkable and cyclable to all major sites and benefits from generous internal space. 3 bedrooms, a significant off-street parking, as you can see, ensuring no pressure on the surrounding streets. Neighbour amenity has been taken seriously. Communal areas are positioned away from shared boundaries. Sound insulation is proposed, and the property has a proven history of calm professional occupation. This proposal is about raising standards, not lowering them. I would like to speak personally for a moment. I've lived in Alveston for almost 40 years. My family ran shops here locally. I've got friends and family that still live here, and I let property in the area with long-standing tenants with positive relationships. I care deeply about the community and wouldn't invest in something that would hurt the area that I know very well. This proposal supports Derby's workforce, local prosperity, local businesses, economic growth, very considerate at providing safe, well-managed homes for people who contribute to the city positively. I respect the committee to approve it on its merits and not anything else. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Bowler. Committee. Councillor Prosser.
I've got a couple of questions, so hopefully, maybe come back at various things because it's going to be interesting. First of all, we're always still using this 20-year-old out-of-date parking requirement figure. I did a little bit of research on this. In 2010, Nottinghamshire created their own. Could we create our own statistics for this city along those bases to find out what the current requirement should be for parking? What department would do with that? How can we kick that off to make sure that we can get the figures right?
Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I guess we could. That obviously takes resources and time to do that. But what I will say about those standards that we obviously refer to, and it's not the only way that we look at parking. You can actually look at the census in terms of tenure and size of housing in terms of car ownership, etc., to get some idea. And the standards, they all sort of align. They all sort of say the same thing. So I would suggest, yes, it is old. It is the only national research that's been done that we can find. But obviously, you know, we can refer to the census as well, so we can cross-reference that, and we tried to do it. But I've got to be honest, in a committee report, that tends to start to get really technical and confusing. So I think we just basically, you know, we keep to that broad standard. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
It was just, I noticed Nottingham produced their own a long time ago, and I wanted to just clear that up. I'm presuming on the parking, we're conditioning out the main gate that through the wall, and that would allow the other gate to be used. So is parking still going to be in this application?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Because it's quite confusing on there where it says Brighton Road entrance to be used. That's got to be blocked up, and then the existing entrance, because I hadn't clocked the other entrance earlier, so I just wanted to clear that. Okay, so the report says it meets minimum living standards, but can I ask, how do we know? The application doesn't provide information to actually support that statement, i.e. how many physical toilets are not marked on there, how many cookers, how many sinks. To meet the minimum standards, this application requires 2 toilets, 2 cookers and 2 sinks, or other kitchen appliances which are not actually specified in the application. Only 1 cooker and 1 sink are visible on the plans, and therefore we have to conclude that it does not meet the minimum requirements, at least in specification level, because it is not specified in the documents as far as I can see. It also states the 1-bedroom thing not showing the dining room, which I see Kike has already highlighted. But I can conclude that minimum standards haven't been met in the specification presented to us today. I also note that Article 4 gets a passing mention, but there's no real discussions on that in the summary. So Article 4 was brought in for this very street, amongst others in the area. This section of Brighton Road is filled with high-volume HMOs, removing vital family accommodation, causing problems with bin storage, maintenance and antisocial behaviour. The HMO statement supplied in the application states that this application is compliant with our guidelines, but that statement is wrong, and it took me only 10 seconds to confirm at the site today. If you stand in front of that property today, you'll see 11 HMO advertising boards visible in the street, and I don't even know if it's legal to permanently present that on the street as an advertising boarding. But I then paced out the 50-metre radius described in the HMO guidance in our Article 4 declaration. Within 50 metres of this property, I found 24 other properties, which may count as around 30, depending on how you calculate flats. At least 5 of those up to 30 are HMOs, and it could be as high as 9, because the 5 were easily identifiable, but I'm sure there will be more if I did full research. That means that HMOs in the area are already between 16 and 30% of the properties within 50 metres of this application. This breaches Derby's HMO limit of 10% within a 50-metre radius by a considerable margin. And on these grounds, I think this application should be rejected. So it does not meet our HMO policy, and it doesn't meet our minimum housing standard requirements according to what is in the application. So that's... Thank
Thank you, Tim. Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I draw members' attention to the comments of housing standards in Part 5.2, and what appeal cases have done in the recent past is highlight the difference in standards between those housing standards which require specific reference to things like fire safety and other factors, and the responsibility of the planning authority to look at living standards in line with policies such as GD5. And if you revert to the floor layout, please, James. As you can see, that all bedrooms have got outlook, windows. The building is quite a spacious arrangement in terms of it provides internal storage, which some HMOs do not. We've got the living accommodation at ground floor level. The agent who has spoken will, of course, have to adhere to other standards as laid out in 5.2 and any other building regulation issues. In terms of concentration, James has just shown the plan of the immediate area of licensed HMOs that we have information about. Clearly, of course, that is something that has been of interest to members, obviously with this application and with others. I would highlight, of course, that policy H7 of the draft plan, which is currently out for consultation, does refer to the 50-metre radius, but at the moment that policy is only in draft regulation 18 stage. So we can hang little weight on that, but of course we don't have any prescriptive level as to what currently the concentration level should be. So we have to make a judgment, and when we look at that particular plot, it affords occupants with on-street car parking at the front, private rear garden space at the side, and the internal accommodation from a planning point of view provides good outlook, front and rear. It's got a separate independent access, and it's in a relatively spacious plot when you contextually assess other properties in the area. So hence our recommendation. Of course, it's over to you to talk about what you think about the concentration in that particular area, but our judgment is that that concentration is acceptable, and based on its individual planning merits, that property would afford the prospective residents a reasonable standard of living for the reasons given. So happy to take any further questions, Chair.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Kerr.
I was also going to highlight that the information on parking that we are relying on is nearly 20 years out of date, and doing our own research does seem to me a reasonable way of looking at that. But I did a quick Google to see if there was anything more recent. I didn't find anything, but I did identify a comment in Trends about car ownership and which says that car clubs are becoming more and more popular. And I don't know whether we are in a position to say that when you're starting an HMO, you ought to be paying in to support a car club in that general location. And it'd be useful to know if that is something that we would be able to condition or not. Maybe it's something after our new local plan goes forward we might be able to factor in. The layout as it is at the moment, if we have 4 cars in the 4 parking spaces shown on the plan, it's going to be very difficult to walk to reach the front door on the side of the house. And I think that the layout as it stands, the external layout, is something that we need to look at again. The bins are there in front of the front door, which I don't think is great, that you've got other places you could put a bin. So I'd like to see a condition that will move the bins so that you're not walking out of the front door, falling into a bin. You don't want them too far from the door so that you do actually put things in the right bin, but you ought to be able to get to the front door, and I think past parked cars. And I do wonder whether putting in a pedestrian access in the side wall might be a solution towards that. I accept that the housing licensing situation has to be dealt with separately to this one. But we've also got a nice garden here. There's no condition included, I think, at the moment about management of the outdoor space. So a condition to look at the management of the outdoor space, I think, would be useful as well.
Thanks, Lucy. Ian, condition that? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I know we discussed this at pre-agenda, and if members agree, we could attach another condition to reposition bin storage facility and look at another on-site parking arrangement. If that was deemed to be the way forward, we could do that by condition. That would be reasonable. And if you felt, you know, that it has got a nice rear garden, that could be safeguarded for future occupants also, as part of a management plan. And clearly the applicant can hear these issues and address them. Thank you.
Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the speakers and thanked them for attending. I've read the documents and listened to what the officers have outlined to us at the meeting. And I can't really see anything that would make me not vote for the officer recommendation at the bottom of page 9. If you look at the principle of development, that is acceptable, Chair. Residential amenity deemed there's no harm, and housing standards is met, and the mandatory licence will be required. I do agree with Councillor Kerr. Perhaps we should, if we can, put a condition on about the car sharing I understand, obviously, that the local plan is at the moment out for consultation, so the implications that were referred to aren't relevant at the moment because we are in a consultation stage. But I think with the perhaps addition of the extra condition as outlined by Councillor Kerr, I'm willing to move the recommendation as printed. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. Councillor Evans, do you want to come in? John? Yeah?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a traditional area of Ulverston known as Cruton. I'm very familiar with it. I grew up on Winton Avenue over 55 years ago. I do remember those houses being built by Yallop Byard. There's not many, there's only a few. And remarkably, one of my friends lived in one further down. His mum still lives there. She's lived there since it was built. The houses aren't big inside. That house has had an extension, I grant that, but they're not big inside. There isn't an awful lot of space. For me, we're taking away yet another family home. I grew up in that area with, it was all families, and yet again we're here thinking we can allow a home to be used for other purposes and not used for a family home. It would make a lovely family home, and why can't it remain as such? I do feel that the density of houses in that area is already the most dense in the whole of Ulverston, in that area. If you look at the maps, it really is. We've got between 5 and 9 HMOs already in that area, albeit there may not be licensed ones, but it doesn't mean they're not there. They are there. They are there. And in my opinion, this should be outright refused. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any others? Move to the vote, didn't you? Yeah. Yes. Move? Yep, move to the vote. So all those in favour of the application?
It's 4 in favour, Chair.
Any against? 6. So we now come to decision time, Stephen.
Chair, I would, yeah, Chair, if somebody would like to put a proposal, I assume for refusal. Together with reasons, I should say.
So it looks like it might be me. Based on the approximate 30% HMO in the area already, it's too high a level of HMO within what is a family home area. And it does go against our Article 4 direction and the principles behind it, whether our policy is fully in place or not. It goes against the guidelines that are on our website, and actually the statement in the planning application that says it complies with that is false, because there is an application in the, statement in the application that says it's less than 10%, and it clearly wasn't at the time and clearly isn't at the moment.
So just to clarify, Councillor Prosser, that's the over-concentration of HMOs in the immediate area, the 50-metre radius, and through the debate, it was the impact on the overall character of the area in terms of the loss of another family home, and you'd also mentioned issues of parking and congestion. Is that also part of your rationale?
Yes, I mean, obviously the parking is mostly mitigated by the fact there are 4 spaces on the property if they're still in use, and there are issues with that entrance because it's a very difficult junction that's on. Yeah, I mean, that covers it, I think. The HMO list that you've got on the map that you've got is out of date. And like I say, a quick stand at the street, and all those dots should be, upgraded to what's currently there. Just to highlight that, because they're obviously licensed HMOs and there are others in that circle.
Yes, I think that reflects probably the policies that Councillor Graves was mentioned at the beginning during his speech. So yes, if you would care to ask for somebody to put it and ask for a seconder, then we can move to the vote.
I take it you're proposing, Tim? Yep. Have we a seconder? John, thank you very much. So we'll go to the vote now to refuse the application. So all those in favour of refusal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Any against? 1, 2, 3. That application is refused.
Need a nominator.
Need a nominator for the... You, Tim? Yeah, well, Councillor Prosser. We've nominated Councillor Prosser. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Waller. Thank you, Kirk. Alan, you're staying on. You've got another one, haven't you? Yeah, so thanks very much for that. Move on to item 8.2, which is land to the east of Lavinia Court, north of Sinfinmore Lane, Chellaston. Jenny, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for residential development, which would include 39 2-, 3- and 4-bedroom dwellings and apartments with associated roads, footpaths, car parking and green open space areas at land to the east of Lavinia Court and north of Sinfinmore Lane, Chellaston. The application site is located in the south of Shelton Lock, positioned to the north-east of Lavinia Court and immediately north of Sinfinmore Lane, within a well-established residential area. The site occupies a sustainable location on the edge of the existing urban fabric and represents a logical and contained opportunity for residential development. The site comprises a roughly triangular-shaped parcel of semi-natural grassland extending to approximately 0.98 hectares. Ground levels generally fall from south to north by around 2 metres, although this change in topography is not considered to constrain the development. Its current character is defined by open grassland interspersed with informal vegetation, and it has historically remained undeveloped. The site is well enclosed and visually contained by hedgerows along the western, northeastern and southern boundaries. These hedgerows provide a landscape framework and work towards limiting views into and out of the site from surrounding areas. In addition, there are a number of mature trees along the northeastern boundary adjoining an area known as the Piggery, which forms part of a wider area of open public meadowland to the north. These features contribute positively to local character and provide opportunities for retention and enhancement as part of the proposed development. The site has historically been allocated as public open space within the adopted City of Derby local plan review. However, despite this allocation, the land has never been laid out, managed or brought forward as formal public open space, nor has it been equipped or maintained to serve a recreational function. There is no evidence of structured public use, formal access or investment to deliver the intended open space purpose. The site has remained an undeveloped and enclosed parcel of land with no formal public access or facilities, and its role as designated open space has therefore not been developed. The surrounding area is already well served by existing accessible and high-quality green spaces, including the Piggery and other nearby recreational and amenity areas, connected by an extensive footpath and cycleway network. The immediate surroundings are predominantly residential in nature. Properties within the existing residential development of Lavinia Court, which is located off of Sinfinmore Lane, forming the southern boundary context, is comprised of 3-storey townhouses, establishing a built form and scale that is compatible with the type of development proposed. To the north, the site transitions into areas of open green space, including the Piggery and further green corridors leading towards Fullan's Lock, creating a clear and gradual interface between built development and open land. The site is therefore set within a mixed urban edge context, with established housing on one side and accessible green infrastructure on the other, allowing development to be sensitively integrated without encroaching into isolated countryside. Approach to the site from the south is via mature residential streets, and the wider area benefits from an extensive and well-established network of footpaths and cycle routes. These routes provide high levels of connectivity to nearby residential areas, as well as to green amenity spaces, recreational areas and play facilities located to the north, east and west of the site. The site is well located to take advantage of the area's green footpath and cycleway network, which links local neighbourhoods with parks, open spaces and recreational facilities. This supports sustainable travel choices and aligns strongly with planning objectives to promote walking and cycling over private car use. Due to the site's boundary, vegetation and contained form, the land is not visually prominent in the wider landscape. The existing hedgerows and trees provide effective screening, ensuring that development can be accommodated without causing unacceptable visual impacts on neighbouring properties or the surrounding green infrastructure. Overall, the site sits comfortably within the existing settlement pattern of Shelton Lock and Sinfin Moor Lane. Its enclosed nature, suitable topography, proximity to established housing, strong sustainable transport connections, and the non-delivery of its historic open space allocation indicate that it is a highly suitable and sustainable location for residential development, particularly where new on-site open space and wider green infrastructure improvements can be secured as part of the proposal. Members will note that this application has been under consideration for a considerable period of time, having been originally submitted in 2023. Throughout this time, officers have worked closely with the applicant's agent to secure a number of amendments and improvements to the scheme. These include a reduction in the number of units from 41 to 39, the repositioning of units, a reduction in height and positioning of one of the apartment buildings, namely Unit F, and an overall redesign of the scheme, including improvements to highways, land drainage, materials, and general appearance and functionality of the site. The proposed development comprises a residential layout accessed from Sinfin Moor Lane, served by a new internal estate road with associated footways and pedestrian connections. The access arrangement establishes a clear hierarchy of movement within the site, with a primary route extending northwards from the site entrance and secondary shared surfaces providing access to individual plots. Pedestrian permeability is provided throughout the site via footways and dedicated pedestrian links, which connect the development to adjoining residential areas and existing public footpaths. These connections improve accessibility and integrate the site with the surrounding neighbourhood. Residential plots are arranged in short terraces and small groupings, positioned to front on streets, shared surfaces, and areas of public open space, including 2-storey houses, 3-storey townhouses, and 4-storey dormer townhouses, together with apartment units. Private amenity space is provided to all residential properties, typically in the form of rear gardens or defined private external areas. Buildings are generally set back from the carriageway, behind small front gardens or forecourts, reinforcing a domestic streetscape and allowing space for planting. Parking provision is distributed across the site and integrated into the layout. This includes a combination of integral garages, on-plot driveway parking, and small groups of shared or on-street parking bays. Servicing, refuse collection, and emergency vehicle access are accommodated via the internal road network and appropriately sized turning areas. Public open space is provided within the site and is readily accessible from surrounding dwellings. An attenuation pond is located within a landscaped area, forming part of the site's sustainable drainage strategy, whilst also contributing to visual amenity and biodiversity. Existing boundary hedgerows and planting are largely retained and supplemented with additional landscaping to enforce site boundaries and soften the visual impact of development. The proposed development comprises a mix of houses and apartments arranged across the site in a series of distinct building types, providing a range of unit sizes, heights and tenures. The scheme includes 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses, together with apartment blocks positioned at key locations within the site to provide visual interest and legibility, whilst responding to site boundaries, neighbouring development and areas of public open space. Amendments to the individual house types have been made throughout the life of the application. The materials as originally proposed were considered overly dark and oppressive. Therefore, a lighter and softer palette has been proposed. External materials have been refined throughout the application process, which improves the visual quality, provides a variety across building types, and responds positively to the surrounding context. The final materials are to be secured through the submitted plans and submitted documents. Private garden depths across the site generally range between approximately 7 metres and 12.5 metres, providing usable outdoor amenity space. Parking provision varies between 2 and 3 spaces per dwelling, depending on unit size and type, with a combination of on-plot spaces, garages and communal parking areas provided to meet adopted standards. 37 objections and 4 comments have been received throughout the life of the application, including an objection from Councillor Graves. However, the scheme has been carefully assessed against the relevant development plan policies and national policy guidance, and the proposed development is considered capable of being accommodated without causing unacceptable harm to neighbouring residential amenity, the character of the area or highway safety. Although a significant number of objections have been received, the issues raised have been fully considered and addressed throughout the decision-making process, and it's considered that the identified impacts do not outweigh the significant benefits of the scheme. In conclusion, the site is located in a sustainable edge-of-city location with good access to local amenities, public transport and active travel routes, and is therefore considered an acceptable location for additional residential development in principle. As members are aware, the Council is unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, meaning the tilted balance under paragraph 1D, part 2 of the NPPF applies. In this context, the delivery of 39 new homes, including affordable homes, carries significant weight. To reiterate and highlight, as highlighted by Paul Clark during the debate of the application at the Hollow at the last meeting, the policy context of the tilted balance needs to be properly applied. This means that in this situation, where there is a significant housing shortfall and the city cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing, the benefits of delivering a substantial number of new houses in the city must therefore be given significant weight. In this case, the positive balance is heavily tilted. Permission should only be refused where any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole, having particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable homes, individually or in combination. In this case, there are some adverse impacts in terms of the current local plan aspiration for proposed open space, amenity impacts for immediate residential neighbours, and ecological impacts. But in my opinion and judgment, these would in no way counter the tilted balance position. In my opinion, for the proposed development, which has been positively amended during its life, the balance falls decisively in its favour and permission should be granted, subject to conditions and planning obligations set out in the officer report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jenny. Breathe. We have one speaker on this. Councillor Graves. Alan, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of local residents and in defence of scarce and valuable public open space in an area already identified as deficient in such provision. National policy is explicit. Paragraph 103 of the National Planning Policy Framework states that existing open space, sports and recreational land should not be built on unless one of these 3 strict tests is met: that an assessment shows the land is surplus to requirements, that equivalent or better replacement provision is secured, or that the development is for alternative sports and recreation provision, the benefits of which clearly outweigh the loss. None of these tests are convincingly met here. There is no robust evidence that this space is surplus to requirements. On the contrary, it is used informally by walkers and local residents in an area already short of accessible green space. Its loss would conflict with NPPF paragraph 96, which promotes healthy, inclusive communities, and paragraph 102, which recognises the importance of access to high-quality open spaces for well-being. Local policy reinforces this position. Policy CP3, placemaking principles, and Policy CP4, character and context, requires development to respond positively to local character and create high-quality environments. The loss of established open land on the edge of Cynthia Moore Lane next to green wedge land would erode the area's character and amenity. Saved Policy GD5 amenity requires development not to cause unacceptable harm through noise, disturbance, traffic or loss of outlook. 39 dwellings, associated roads and parking would materially alter the quieter edge of the estate environment residents currently enjoy. Furthermore, Policy CP23, delivering a sustainable transport network, requires development to ensure safe and suitable access. Access to this site is extremely difficult and impacts on pedestrian safety. There is insufficient evidence to demonstrate that impacts would be acceptable. Environmental considerations are also central. NPPF, paragraph 180, requires development to minimise impacts on biodiversity and provide net gains. Without clear, quantified biodiversity net gain evidence, compliance is not demonstrated. 37 residents have objected. While planning is not a referendum, that level of objection evidences the genuine community value of this space. Planning decisions must be plan-led. In my view, the officer recommendation fails to properly reconcile the clear conflict with national policy, specifically NPPF paragraphs 96, 102, 103 and 180, and with policies CP3, CP4, CP23 and GD5 of the development plan. The proposal results in the loss of valued community open space, runs contrary to both national and local planning policy, and has generated significant resident objection. For those reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to refuse this application.
Thanks, Alan. Jenny? No, nothing. No. Committee. Councillor Prosser.
I'm going to try and not repeat much of that, but obviously it was designated public open space. If we look at the map there, it's bounded by the old railway line that may form part of a new tram route currently under investigation, the canal that may reopen, though probably not in my lifetime, and the parkland to the north. It's seen as important public space because it is and contributes greatly to that area. It provides an important wildlife corridor as well from the piggery to the wider fields, and that would be lost, that link through the gap that you can see. The site sits down a very tight close, so where the entrance is going to be on that corner is an extremely nasty corner already. It takes considerable traffic through the existing housings and to the farm, often with tractors and other vehicles, but also worse than that, you see the path coming in from the right on that picture. That is a very highly used public access for cyclists, dog walkers and pedestrians because it's the old railway line. It comes out of Chellaston and it heads straight towards the canal path on the left. What we have in this application is a junction right at that corner, which is really, really nasty. It's already a very difficult corner, but should cars be going straight over that junction, you're cutting across a major flow of cyclists, pedestrians, dog walkers, a huge number of public, one of the busiest public walkways probably in this city, because it is the main access route for people going to work and for people exercising. And that's a really dangerous spot to have that junction. I don't see anything in the application that looks at the impact on that flow of pedestrian traffic across that area. I'm also concerned about the retaining wall that's going to support that road. Obviously, these things are technically possible, but it does present a risk to the council in the future with it being the support for the ramp up to the bridge there, which at the moment is not in use, but may come into use in the future. So that's the concerns I have. I think it's probably an overdevelopment for the small close it's within. I think it's very dangerous with the entrance being on that corner to such a huge estate. And I am really concerned about the loss of public open space. Thank you.
Martin?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, we're back to considering our old friend, the tilted balance, in this application as we have to with many others. And we have to do that in the context that we don't have a 5-year supply of housing land for the city. So in planning terms, we have to consider the need for housing and give that great weight. Permission should be granted unless there are very good reasons to refuse. And of course, we look at each application on its merits and weigh all those factors up in helping us to decide. In the past, we have had to reconsider Green Wedge and allocated public open space in order to meet our housing needs. So this site isn't unique in that aspect. In terms of this particular piece of land, although it is designated as open space, it's private land, it's enclosed with hedgerows. There's not much evidence in the report that it's currently being used and functioning as public open space. and I don't think there's any evidence of any public rights of way to the land at present. So all of those factors we have to weigh up. And in fact, the proposed development could potentially give us a higher quality of public open space than actually we've got there at the moment. Couple of questions just to seek a little bit of reassurance in terms of protection of the mature trees that have been mentioned on site, and to make sure that those are protected as far as we can. And also a question just about some reassurance about the route of the canal to make sure that that is protected. But subject to that, Chair, I think the demonstrable need for housing in the city, and I've been doing some casework from a resident who's been waiting 10 years in terms of being able to find suitable accommodation, and we have to weigh all of that up as well in our balance. So I think taking all of that into account, subject to that reassurance, then I would support the application.
Thanks, Martin. Jenny, do you want to come back on the trees and the canal, please?
Yeah, I can do. So there are conditions on there that protects both the trees and the canal. I don't know if Mr Woodhead's got more to say.
Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Rawson stole my thunder basically on spelling out those issues. It's not open space or playing field that requires special consideration in terms of criteria for disposal. As Councillor Rawson's indicated, it's private land. It's proposed open space in the current development plan, but that's never been brought forward. And as Paul Clark indicated with the debate at the Hollow, the balance is heavily tilted. We have a massive affordable housing shortage. When we are looking at decisions, it is under paragraph 11D1, the significant and demonstrable test. And if the adverse impacts are not significant and demonstrable, then we should be granting planning permission. And that is something that was very clearly spelt out by Chris Young KC in this very room. And it's something that's spelt out in various other appeal cases, Chair, across the country, where we're looking at green belt land for release, grey belt land, and moving forward in the new development plan, the release and rollback of more green wedge land, Chair. So these sites are very important in the housing mix, and it's our professional responsibility to advise you that unless you meet the significant and demonstrable test, you should be granting planning permission. The balance is tilted heavily in this case. Affordable housing needs are great. That was spelt out in April of last year in this very room, and that position has not changed. So Chair, I think Councillor Rawson is on the very right lines here, and I would certainly endorse and promote the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Is that okay for you, Martin? Yep, good. Councillor Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just fairly briefly, given that this development includes affordable housing, and you know, we've just sat in a training and listened to officers telling us about 9,000, a waiting list of 9,000 and over 200 households in temporary accommodation. You know, I feel very much minded to approve this application and welcome the addition of the housing stock.
So, John.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is another area I'm very familiar with. I live in Chellaston now, and I walk around this area at least 3 times a week on the canal path, and I sometimes have my dogs off lead on that place where we're proposing for the entrance into the site. That's only if it's early. There's many vehicles already parked on the main road leading down to the canal path junction, and the park there on the pavements, you have to walk in the middle of the road anyway. So further cars in that area, in that development, although they've got parking bays and they may have garages, if there's parking onto the road part, it makes it even worse. I don't know if this is relevant, but I thought Chellaston Senior School is already oversubscribed. massively. And this is going to add to that. I don't know if that's been taken into consideration. If not, should it be? I've actually walked into that piece of land with my dogs a few times. It's hard to get into. Why has it not been developed? I know it's private, but why has it been left? Has it been purposely left for a future development like this? Although it was classed as open space. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Do you know anything about that?
Funding was never brought forward, Chair, for it. It never got laid out or taken forward as open space, Chair. I couldn't tell you the specific financial background to that, but that's the overall position.
Okay, in that case, could we not pursue that instead?
No, that's not the proposal.
Just coming back onto the junction, and Andy, have you got any comments on the junction, where it's positioned, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, we've had a look at it. You know, visibility coming out of there is, it meets 30 mile per hour road, so it's more than adequate. The speeds along there aren't going to be that fast. Full visibility as well. You know, cars will basically hang on the corner and they'll be able to see what's coming the other way. I do understand the concerns about cyclists. I think that something needs to be done around the junction, probably to make sure that... Sorry? Yeah, it is a condition. Just to make sure that that's designed in a way that probably slows cyclists down, but also that they have priority across the junction as well. So, you know, we have thought very carefully about it and think that there is something that can work there and can make it safe. In terms of safety around the rest of the network, you know, there are very, very few accidents around here, as you might expect, just because, you know, I guess the nature of the roads, the alignment of the roads and the speed of vehicles. So, yeah, we're satisfied.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Thanks for the reassurance about the canal route and the junction design. I'm also mindful that this is going to be a cyclist design, pedestrian desire line to cut off the corner for a circular walk, and therefore the end of the cul-de-sac shown at the sort of top end of the plan that we're looking at is going to, I think, going to require a decent footpath, cycling width footpath through from there and connections onto the route beyond. And it doesn't seem to be shown at the moment, but I think that, can we condition something along those lines? There's also a strange comment about garage doors, and there's sort of reference to saying that garages need to be maintained as garages. Now, if that goes in as a condition, it's going to be really difficult to enforce as permitted development, but it's then going to mean that we would be reducing the amount of parking within this area. Now, the numbers that we've been presented with did look as though it was achievable even without every garage counting as parking space. But it's also, this is another example of where putting some funding into a car club scheme would help give people an alternative to owning their own car and having to park it somewhere. So I don't know whether we can do something along those lines. It's obviously going to be further pressure financially on the development. What wouldn't be a financial development, a cost, would be to just ensure that we've got hedgehog holes between back gardens as part of our biodiversity work. But maybe we can put a condition in about that. The condition 12 seems to cover most of, it seems to be the highway condition, but it doesn't seem to cover all the things to do with highways. So can we make sure that that's fleshed out sufficiently to cover all the highways things that were issued before? I'm hoping the affordable housing, much welcome affordable housing, is going to be pepper potted across the site. And it would be useful for the bits of public open space, which I do welcome, to include something like a bench to give people a purpose for actually stopping there and enjoying it rather than just walking past it. So whether we are able to include something as simple as that as part of final sort of design layouts, that would be good. Otherwise, I agree that this is something that we should be approving. It does need to be designed to a sufficient standard to make it good quality, although we need it. And I think with those sort of changes that I've mentioned, it should become something that is a little estate that could be valued rather than ignored, as it were.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to pick up on a few of those points, Councillor Kerr, there is a connection we can ensure there is from the end of the cul-de-sac in that top corner of the site. We did reposition, you'll note, the apartment block away from the row of silver birch trees on the southern boundary. That was secured post our discussion at pre-agenda. So that's moved and now presents itself to the small section of footpath, and the developer was amenable to laying out and providing some bench opportunities on that piece of open space. And you'll also note that the conditions as per on page 50 under 8.3, it does say the conditions are listed in an abbreviated format. We've done that on barrister advice to avoid putting detailed conditions in and being prescriptive and then getting tied to a particular wording once members or if members resolve to grant planning permission. So that's why they're presented in that format, Councillor Kerr. But Jenny has precisely worded them. I took them all out. It took me a while actually, and then abbreviated them all. So that's why they're presented as they are, Councillor Kerr. So apologies for any confusion there. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Miles, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kerr referenced the affordable home aspect to this, and I think I'm right in saying, looking at the report, there'll only be 6 dwellings that are affordable. Is it 15%? That seems pretty low to me. I know, obviously, as a committee, we've been having some discussions recently around the importance of affordable homes on these new developments. I think 15%, 6 houses out of 39, is actually quite disappointing. And I think we should maybe consider upping that. I think if we were to up it from 6 to 10, 25%, I think is a fair figure for this development. And I'd like to put that forward as a recommendation.
Yes, Ian. Yep.
Yeah, paragraph 8.5 spells it all out. It's been through the district valuer, and that's the position that we can legitimately ask for based on the viability appraisal of this scheme. The DV is used in all cases where there is a viability conundrum, and as the report states, if there is an uplift, then we will look for further contributions, as it says in the first bullet point at the top of page 57, provision of affordable housing within the city, financial equivalent of units not being provided on site, and that's at a point at a review at 90% of the development occupation. So that's the trigger for that reassessment of the scheme, Chair. That's based on the district valuer's assessment of the viability of the scheme. The scheme's been in for a while, Chair. It's been in since 2023, and there have been a number of things that we've looked at. The scheme's been redesigned. We've lost a couple of units, and so all these things go into the viability mix, and that's what's come out of the scheme as amended. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ian.
John?
Thank you, Chair. Earlier I mentioned about Chellaston Academy and the provision at Chellaston Academy. Could that be answered, please? The effects of this on that?
There's no requirement in the Section 106 to look at, given the number of units on this site, Councillor Evans, so that's not part of this equation. Thank you.
Any more? Councillor Bolton?
Not to prolong things too much more, Chair, but I really want to support what Councillors Bonser and Rawson have already said on this application. We've got to be pragmatic, we've got to listen to what the officers are telling us, and we've got to bear in mind what we've previously been guided by from recent or fairly recent appeal decisions. We need the housing, as Councillor Bonser already referred to in her contribution. We've had training earlier this evening about the affordable element, and I take on board what the previous councillor said, but listening to Mr Woodhead, the district valuer has intervened, and clearly what's at the bottom of page 56 paragraph 8.5 is correct, and we have to really abide by that. We need the housing, we need the affordable housing element, and let's get on with it. I move.
Thanks, Councillor Bolton. All those in favour of the application?
5, 6, 7.
7, Chair, yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Any against? 2. That application is passed. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the speakers. We move now to the last item, 8.3, Assembly Rooms, Marketplace. We know where that is, don't we? Laura?
Thank you, Chair. This application is a Section 73 application to amend conditions 3, 4 and 5 of the previously approved demolition in a conservation area application, which granted permission to demolish the assembly rooms and associated multi-storey car park. Just one point of housekeeping. Condition 2, as included in your report, should include the site plan, demolition plan and also demolition works report, which has been received during the life of the application. The application seeks to amend conditions 4 and 5 to align with the details agreed under the respective approved discharge of condition applications as referenced within your report. It's common practice where conditions have been previously discharged that they are amended in Section 73 applications to reflect the already agreed details. Therefore, these amendments are a point of fact as they have already been discharged and considered by the authority. Whilst the application has attracted objections in respect of the amendments to conditions 4 and 5, the main focus of these objections has been the amendment to condition 3. Condition 3 was attached to the original permission requiring a contract to be in place for redevelopment of the entire site before any demolition works take place. The applicant is seeking to change the wording of the condition to remove the word contract and replace this with development agreement. The development agreement remains a legally binding agreement between the relevant parties and will be signed and sealed by the council like any other contract. The amendment to condition 3 will align the demolition application with the council's processes for redevelopment as clarified by regeneration colleagues within the report. The council will enter into a development agreement with their preferred development partner, Ion and Vinci, with the development agreement providing greater control than the contract, containing specific clauses relating to the setting out of responsibilities for obtaining planning permissions and meeting project milestones, managing the finances of the project, governing the collaboration between the landowner, developers, and including dispute resolutions, specifying building specifications and considering quality standards. It will provide specific milestones for stages of the development process and timescales within which these need to be achieved, for example, funding agreements and also obtaining planning consents, and also consider risk management. The development agreement is a legally binding contract, considering the entire site and offers greater controls over critical matters, as explored within the comments of regeneration colleagues within the report, who are experienced in delivering multi-phased development schemes such as Castle Ward. Whilst policy E18 of the City of Derby local plan requires a contract, this policy was adopted in 2006 and the development world has significantly changed since that time. Development agreements are common practice and this change of wording reflects the delivery approach of modern multi-phased schemes, securing the comprehensive redevelopment of this important site. The amended wording is therefore recommended for approval. It is our opinion that the amendments do not weaken the requirements of the condition, which will still need to go through the full discharge process. An agreed development scheme is still required before any demolition can take place, with the demolition not being considered in isolation, but as part of the wider comprehensive redevelopment of this prominent site. The development agreement defines obligations, manages finances, governs timescales and mitigates risks as a recognised industry method for securing complex construction schemes. As such, the recommendation is to approve the amendments to these conditions as drafted in your report. Chair, you have speakers. There has been a change to the speakers. Andrew Webster is no longer speaking, but Jess Hegarty will speak in his place. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Jess, you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Can you hear that? You can hear me now? Yeah. Yeah, okay, great. Apologies, thank you. Good evening, members, officers and members of the public. My name is Jessica Herity. I'm an Associate Director at Turley, acting as agent on behalf of the Derby City Council. We also act on behalf of Vinci UK Developments and Ion Developments, who are the development partners of the Council and applicants for the Marketplace Regeneration Scheme to replace the assembly rooms following demolition. That application was submitted in January and is due for determination in the coming months. The variation of Condition 3, which seeks to replace the word contract with development agreement, has attracted the most interest, with concerns raised that a development agreement could give the Council less control and certainty over the holistic demolition and redevelopment of the assembly rooms. We want to explain how the revision proposed will actually provide greater certainty, a structured approach to redevelopment, and will protect the Council's interests in the site. The current condition wording refers openly to a contract and is capable of being interpreted in many ways, including as a construction contract, for instance with a building contractor for delivery of the comprehensive redevelopment of the site. The extent of the approved demolition works is significant and likely to require 12 months to complete. The final contract sum associated with the comprehensive redevelopment scheme will only be capable of being determined following demolition and further investigative works. As is common practice for a scheme of this scale, the demolition works will be the subject of a separate contract to that of the redevelopment scheme. Given the timescales, a building contractor will not be willing to enter a contract over a year before the commencement of building works, and it would therefore not be possible to duly discharge this condition and lawfully commence the works if contract is interpreted as a building contract for the redevelopment works. The development agreement is in itself a contract typical of major multi-phase regeneration schemes such as this, and will place obligations on the developer to deliver the scheme as a whole in accordance with an agreed timescale and agreed master plan. The proposed wording change makes the condition more precise, will ensure that the whole redevelopment is comprehensively delivered, and makes it clear that there is no requirement for this to be a construction contract, which will be difficult to achieve and which would not ensure the delivery of the comprehensive redevelopment as a whole in the same way a development agreement will. Through a development agreement, the Council will retain control of land ownership until all relevant conditions of the agreement are met, including entering into a building contract for the delivery of the replacement development. The variation proposed would still achieve the purpose of the condition in accordance with policy ensuring the demolition of the assembly rooms does not happen in isolation of the comprehensive redevelopment. Your officers have concluded that the variation of conditions proposed is acceptable and have recommended this application is approved. The application represents an opportunity for members to support the continued progress made towards the regeneration of a significant city centre site, and we would urge members to move to approve the application in accordance with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Councillor Hassel, you have 3 minutes, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this application seeks to vary Condition 3 of the previously approved consent, specifically the requirement that a full and detailed redevelopment scheme be approved before demolition takes place. That condition is not incidental. It was imposed deliberately to prevent precisely what many residents now fear, demolition without certainty of replacement. The applicant is asking you to relax that safeguard. Members must ask, what has materially changed to justify removing or weakening that protection? We have no detailed, costed, funded or deliverable redevelopment scheme before us tonight. There is no approved design, no confirmed funding package, no construction timetable, no viability evidence demonstrating delivery. In planning terms, this fails the fundamental test of certainty. Paragraph 11 of the MPPF does not require you to accept speculative harm in the hope of future benefit. The demolition of a prominent city centre building without secured replacement development creates clear and irreversible harm, visual harm, heritage harm, townscape harm, and economic uncertainty. Condition 3, to mitigate that harm, removing it creates a very real risk of a cleared site remaining vacant for an extended period. That is not a hypothetical concern, it is a foreseeable planning outcome given the absence of a deliverable scheme. Members must also consider the principles of good planning. The planning system is plan-led and evidence-based. It is not demolition-led. Granting this variation would effectively separate demolition from redevelopment. That undermines the integrity of the original decision and weakens the council's ability to secure a comprehensive scheme. This is not about resisting change, it is about insisting on proper sequencing and accountability. If a credible funded redevelopment proposal is brought forward, members can consider it on its merits. But until that exists, the safeguard should remain. For those reasons, lack of detail, absence of secured funding, failure to demonstrate deliverability, and the significant risk of long-term harm to the city centre, I respectfully urge members to refuse this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve. Come back on that. Thanks, Laura.
I'd just like to reiterate that the application before us is to look at amending the condition. It's not to look into discharge the condition. That will still need to be done at the appropriate time when we've got the level of information around the redevelopment of the site, the funding is in place. It is purely just to change the word from contract to development agreement. Just want to clarify that point. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Chair. For context, before I say anything else, I do want to see an appropriate redevelopment of the highest quality. And after all that, this is our most important city centre site. Demolition is going to obviously be part of that journey. In April 2021, at the planning committee, this planning committee, that agreed the demolition with conditions, the head of planning said, and I'll quote, "Yes, it can be demolished, but," and the but is, "you've got to come back to us with a scheme which works, which we're all happy with, which the planning committee are happy with, and only once you've got planning permission for the subsequent scheme, the rebuild, the enclosure of the marketplace, and then there's a contract in place for that rebuild, only then can you actually demolish the building. So it will be a tandem approach, getting the planning permission, getting the contract in place, and then you can start work to demolish." So when this committee previously approved demolition with conditions, it was assured that demolition would only occur once redevelopment permission was agreed via this committee and when contracts were in place. Obviously, we know that. It's been said several times this evening. The original approval relied on certainty of redevelopment, and this variation, in my view, introduces greater risk. So, Chair, can officers explain to me and members what has changed to justify altering those safeguards and what legally or practically guarantees redevelopment delivery once demolition occurs? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. The application is to amend the wording from contract to development agreement. It doesn't discharge the obligations or the requirements of that condition. So the demolition won't take place on the change to this wording. We will still be expecting a suitable time and application to come back for the redevelopment of the site, and then the discharge of condition will come back.
Sorry to interrupt. This isn't about wording, this is about risk. So my question is the risk.
Well, I think in terms of the development agreement, that's still got to be considered by Cabinet, which will be taken in, that decision will be taken in due course and isn't a consideration that normally the planning committee will get involved with, or the planning authority. The development agreement will sit with the council and still be considered at that point. So in terms of the full heads of terms of that development agreement, that will be shared with us at that appropriate time when the applicant comes back to discharge that condition. We know it will give us more certainty around the points that are referenced in the report around funding, around the mechanisms and milestones for delivering the site, and we won't discharge the condition until we're satisfied that those issues have been met, which is the information that will come back to us at the point of discharge of condition. So it doesn't change that risk.
Councillor Prosser first, then Councillor Kerr.
Sorry, the change of that one word makes a huge difference to the process going forward. It adds an awful lot of flexibility for the council, but removes the safeguards, even though it's only one word and it seems very minor. It completely changes the process which this council will follow moving forward. I would also like to point out the way that this has been used or abused in recent history. So I will point out, for instance, that this council had in place a demolition crew in the building, ready to demolish that building, even though this condition existed. And it was only under severe pressure that that contract was cancelled and that the building wasn't demolished. I would also like to point out that in condition 2 about the Jacobean ceiling, this council, without the appropriate authority, without the appropriate permission, removed the Jacobean ceiling and completely documented the whole process with photographs. The whole crime was documented, and this council should have, through its enforcement officers, pursued the council for its abuse of that condition. We cannot give this council any more room to abuse the conditions that were set. And it really is not acceptable, because if it was a private company, we would have sued them by now. So that's why we as councillors get upset about slight wording changes, pressure in certain directions, because we cannot trust, unfortunately, the motivations behind these, what appear to be extremely minor changes. Because had we not forced this so far, it would have been demolished a year ago, and we would have had a huge hole there, still as a risk. And we've had that before, and that was what this was entirely set to prevent. Another huge hole in the city centre that sits there for years with a big puddle in the middle of it. So that's the reason why we did it. And like I said, we have to look at the recent history as to what the council have done on this project. And at the moment, it's not good, I'm afraid.
Thanks, Tim. Councillor Kerr.
I find this really difficult because the situation we're in at the moment is clearly not at all satisfactory, but it does feel a bit as though we're arguing between the frying pan and the fire. The proposal that's coming forward is 3 separate elements. Now, in the scenario that we want to build one of those elements, it presumably means we have to demolish the whole lot. So first element gets funded and approval and goes forward, and then we're left with 2/3 of a whole because the other 2 elements haven't yet been agreed. So either we have to demolish it in bites, and I think maybe the car park could be demolished separately from the rest of it. Whether we could demolish the large chunk of it and not the Darwin suite, I don't know. So that we could make space on part of the site for partial development, which would be part of a contract. It's the risk of ending up with something that's not, that is still a whole, is, I think, quite real and quite large. And we're being expected to judge whether to have something that's a contract or something that's a management agreement is a more secure way of avoiding a hole in the city centre. I'm not sure that we've got the right advisors here for us. I'm wondering whether we actually need somebody who is more of a procurement expert who can provide that advice. And maybe we ought to be bringing this back with a different level of advice, because this isn't a straightforward planning thing that we mostly deal with. This is different, like procurement we were talking about on our training earlier this week, but not in this depth. And then there's a situation about whether, if we've approved a scheme and we say, actually, this is a prime site the quality of the design that you've put to us is not quite good enough, so it gets amended, and we agree something with the right status that we expect, but then it goes back and we find that the costs have gone up because of the quality of the build has gone up. You know, and then maybe the contract or the development agreement falls apart because the funding no longer meets it. So we could even have that in place, but then the funding isn't sufficient because of... Can we bring this back with some more advice on the procurement side and the procurement differences?
I think from a planning perspective, Councillor Kerr, the condition refers to a contract, and that was specifically used as a word because of the wording of policy E18, which refers to a contract. But in the justification for that policy, it doesn't mention what kind of contract that is. Now, within the body of the report, we've had advice from our regeneration colleagues about the use of development agreements, and of course, as Laura's indicated, this is not to discharge the condition, it's to change the wording, and the development agreement will be discussed and agreed and negotiated with other council colleagues to ensure that once that's agreed and we have a planning permission in place which will be before the committee, which you will consider in full, that is the only time thereafter that the condition can be discharged. So the nuts and bolts of the development agreement in terms of the milestones, the contracts, the funding arrangements will all be secured through discussion with the relevant parties. It's not, as you say, it's not our place as a planning authority to be getting into that level of detail. What we have to do is consider, based on the advice that we have in the report and based on the wording of the condition and the advice in the framework, have we taken all reasonable steps to ensure that the reason for that condition has been met? And that's why we've arrived at the conclusion we have. We've not gone into great detail as to what those specific milestones are, but they will be left and they will be ironed out, and the planning permission will or will not be granted at a later stage in order to discharge condition 3.
Can I ask whether the outline planning application that's going to come to us in due course, whether that is deemed to be sufficient in terms of planning approval to be able to discharge this condition?
And that as a scheme will be brought before this committee, Councillor Kerr. And it's almost as if there has been a movement in...
Chair, through you, it's a simple question. Is that outline planning approval deemed to be sufficient for this condition, or are we expecting a detailed application before we can agree this condition can be signed off?
That is the proposal to discharge the condition that's now live. We have an application that is...
This is, I think, comes to the nub of it, because the outline application does not have sufficient detail, and we would be expecting further detail, which could change the funding costs, which could change the whole ability to deliver on something like this in its 3 phases. So I'm not sure whether we did the right thing in the first place.
I think in terms of the stages, obviously tonight the applicant is seeking to amend the condition. That decision will be taken tonight. Post that, we will then be bringing to you in the next few months the outline consent for the redevelopment of the site with various levels of detail. The development agreement will run alongside that process, and then the applicant will come back to discharge condition 3. At that point, if we do not feel there is sufficient information within that discharge of condition application, then it can be refused, and we don't discharge that condition. We seek further information. But I think we're looking at the steps too far ahead. I think tonight we need to look at, is the change of wording from contract to development agreement, given what's been put within your report about what will be contained within the development agreement, given the fact that the word contract was used because it was referenced in the policy that was a 2006 policy, the development and how development is brought forward, particularly on multi-phase developments like this, has changed significantly, that we won't be in a position where we'd get a build contract at this stage because there's too much unknown around the demolition. As within the report, once demolition's taken place, we still needs to be taken place of kind of land contamination assessments, archaeological assessments still need to be taken place, which could have an impact on the reserve matters phases that would come back should outline planning permission be granted. So I think tonight we just need to think about the change from contract to development agreement, knowing what we've set out in terms of what the development agreement will provide in terms of the level of information. We're not agreeing the development agreement at this time. That information is still yet to come forward, and the decisions will be made by, as Ian says, the development agreement will go through various different services within the authority to ensure it meets procurement rules, etc.
Chair, I think that's a really helpful timeline to be presented. But when we have the condition coming back, will that come back to committee?
Yes, you can request it and we can bring it back. Will?
Can I propose that when this condition, if amended or not if amended, is due to be signed off, we ask for it to come back to committee? Would I get support for that?
I'm happy with that. Yeah. I'm happy with that. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. Shall come back, will come back. Once received, will come back. Yeah.
Yeah. You okay with that, Lucy? Yeah.
If we voted on
it. We'll, no, I think we'll be all right. We'll be all right. It's on record. Martin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, we've heard from officers tonight that in their professional opinion and this change will actually strengthen the council's position in being able to deliver the project. We're ultimately talking about a clarification of the word contract, clarifying that as development agreement. And it's still a legal contract. The protections for the council will still be there. I think what gives us reassurance in terms of what's very different about the Tennant Street site that's been quoted frequently. I remember it as a kid peering through and looking at the hole underneath, full of water, etc. But that was privately owned land and the council had no part whatsoever in its redevelopment. This is council-owned land and the council is driving it through its development partner, is driving the development. So the council actually has full and absolute control over what happens on that site, both before and after the demolition. My concern is that if we don't clarify the wording in terms of this condition, there's the risk that we get into a chicken and egg position where the development can't proceed because of confusion over this word contract and what does the word contract mean. And that would be the worst of all worlds, I would suggest. And the public certainly wouldn't thank us if we put ourselves in the position where the project was stalled or effectively sabotaged and couldn't proceed, just for want of clarifying the type of agreement that we're ultimately talking about. So I'd be happy to accept Councillor Kerr's suggestions, but I do think we should approve this.
Thanks, Martin. It was next. Miles.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to be honest, I'm a bit confused by all of this because we seem to be getting told that the wording doesn't really matter and it's a small change. If that is the case, why is it here? If it doesn't matter that much, something doesn't quite add up for me. And just listening to Councillor Rawson, sorry, comments then about needing to change the word contract so that developers can proceed. What development? We haven't seen anything. We don't know what they're proposing. There's an outline application
that's supposedly going to come to planning committee in a few weeks or maybe in a couple of months. So why are we doing this first? Because we ultimately don't fully understand what it is that's being proposed. Is it costed? All we're being told is that, you know, this wording needs to be amended. And then we'll go and see this great grand development that's being proposed. But why can't it be done the other way around? And just a final concern that I have, and it was something that the applicant gave in their speech when they talked about the importance of being able to carry out the demolition so that investigation works can be carried out. What happens if they find something they don't like? Are we left with a hole again? They could carry out, they could demolish it, they could clear the site, they could find something on the site, and they could turn around and go, oh, this wasn't going to be here, this wasn't supposed to be here, this is going to cost us too much. And can they just back out? And then we are back in the situation that this current wording of this condition helps to avoid, which is being left with an empty site in the middle of the marketplace. So I've got concerns. I think there's risks. I don't think that it seems like the cart before the horse. I don't know why we're not seeing the outline application before this discussion has taken place that's currently taking place tonight.
Thanks, Mark. Can I just come in? Page 60. No development. This is the change of the wording, which is no demolition work shall take place until a scheme for the comprehensive redevelopment of the site has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority, etc. It's virtually the same as what it was. I agree with what you're saying. Why are we having this discussion? But the wording hasn't changed anything, basically. Nothing can be done until... well, we're... yes.
It's specifically to avoid the confusion over the term contract. And so the development agreement, which if you Google development agreements, you will see firms of lawyers telling you how they approach multi-phase developments, what different types of agreements they can have. It is to ensure that we have the correct terminology within that condition. And that condition will then come again, as Laura's indicated, and it will be before the committee to discharge. That's been resolved here, that it will come back and it will be the scheme that is referred to in condition 3 will be before you. And if you feel, based on all the information and all the consultation comments and all the information from consultees that it's not sufficient, then it's in your gift to resist it. It's up to you. That's the debate. But for the time being, it's a development agreement. They are, in all intents and purposes, a contract covering lots of issues within a development framework for a multi-phase agreement. And that's what we've put before you to avoid that confusion.
Thank you for that. But just on another point I made, why are we not seeing the outline application before tonight?
The outline application's not long been in. Its consultations expires today. It's not ready to come before committee this evening. It will come before you when it's ready.
I don't know who's next. John? Yes, Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark wants to come in.
Thanks,
as well,
Chair.
so, yeah. I'll let John.
I understand how there's quite a lot of scepticism amongst the councillors due to the previous history related to the assembly rooms. It's probably tongue-in-cheek, but could I suggest that if it refused tonight, the council could always appeal?
I'll let Mr. Clark come in first, Kieran, and then you. All right.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Woodhead indicated previously, we abbreviate conditions for this very reason, that previously, when the demolition consent was approved, it was a specific wording, specific condition. So we're back here. Councillor Hassel called it committee, quite rightly, because we are talking about contract or demolition development agreement. And Councillor Holmes quite rightly quoted me, was it 2021? seems so long ago, that everything that Councillor Holmes quoted when I referred to a contract is exactly the same as a development agreement. Everything I said then is exactly the same now if you substitute the word development agreement. Yes, I was nervous. We've been off to our friendly barrister, Hugh Richards, who's reviewed the committee report and is content with the committee report. There was 2 minor changes which Laura mentioned in her report about tail pieces to conditions, but substantively we have done all the checks and balances, and I'm comfortable to recommend to you that we have the word development agreement in there because it gives us, as the speaker said, that control that we were expecting with a contract. We've now got with a development agreement because that's how modern contracts for big schemes like this are run. So I'm content, having had that legal advice, that we are comfortable to move forward. Hence the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Oops, thanks, Paul. Thank you for that. Kieran?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I rather suspect we're having this debate today on the back of feedback from the market who are scared of the word contract, but more familiar with the term development agreement. I understand why members are concerned about the change in terminology, because this condition is the key safeguard on a highly sensitive site. And I'm also sensitive to the concerns around not seeing the outline application agreed and not being involved in matters going ahead without proper involvement from this committee. But for me, the important point isn't the word used, it's the legal and commercial effect of the condition. As amended, demolition still cannot proceed, unless I'm wrong, unless there is both an approved comprehensive redevelopment scheme and a binding development agreement with an agreed delivery timeframe. So that control remains in place. I'm particularly mindful as well that the council is the applicant here, so public confidence is what's important. And for me, that means any safeguard must genuinely be enforceable and not simply a change in wording. And I'm satisfied that, as amended, the condition still prevents demolition in isolation. I also recognise the commercial reality of complex phased regeneration schemes, which what is intended as a really strong risk control in the original wording, the word contract, may well in practice be preventing progress by requiring full construction contracts. The contract in itself is likely to contain so many caveats around archaeology and demolition that in practice it's probably not even going to be agreeable as a contract, whereas a development agreement exists for this purpose. It's meant to pivot and change with the requirements of the site. Schemes of this scale, development agreement is the usual and accepted approach. It's the mechanism for securing delivery obligations and milestones and step-by-step flight plans, all the language we're familiar with. I don't believe it's a weaker control. I believe it's a more appropriate, up-to-date control. So subject to councillor Kerr's revision and condition, I'd recommend approval.
Thanks, Kieran. Anybody else? Matt?
Thank you, Chair. Once again, can't state enough that I'm supportive of redevelopment, but I believe we have a duty to ensure demolition does not happen without safeguards ensuring redevelopment follows. Safeguards that were proposed by officers of this council for very good reason and that are currently in place. So we know that demolition is irreversible and could harm the city centre. Once done, we lose leverage over redevelopment delivery, potentially. And I genuinely believe before we should change safeguards previously relied upon, we've got to have assurances that we're not exposing the city centre to long-term vacancy risk. I personally don't have that assurance. Now, I really genuinely look forward to committee considering the redevelopment application, but I can't support this change to the conditions at this time. It seems to me we just need to wait the relatively short amount of time to consider the outline application, and that will allow us to proceed with confidence. And I believe at that point, you know, we could probably be more minded to change or even discharge conditions accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Matt. I'll just refer you back to condition 3. On page 59 and on page 60, down to the bottom, condition 3 is exactly the same. No demolition works shall take place until a scheme for the comprehensive redevelopment site has been submitted. There's no change at anything in that wording. I can understand your concerns, but that's printed. That's printed. So we're going to come back and discuss the redevelopment, and no demolition will take place until we've done that. That's it. Oh, sorry, Lucy. Sorry.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points here. I think the fact that pre-demolition works have taken place, and some of us have been able to see how devastated the building is now internally, rather makes this committee feel as though the wording in this condition that says no demolition works, well, the pre-demolition works were significant. And it does feel as though our prior condition from 2021 was ignored. And I don't think that's a good starting point for people coming and asking for further changes. What I think would have been ideal would be for us as a committee to have been presented with a vision for the future, and for us to enthusiastically approve that, and then to have come back 3 weeks, a month, 2 months later and said, please can you change this wording because this is the way we really want to take that wonderful scheme forward. And it's not been presented in that order, because I think if that had happened, we would then have been saying, yes, all the ducks are in the row, this is what we want to do. And given this, we've got this now, I think that in principle, and thanks for the comments on the, if you like, the historic wording and the modern wording, and having to accept that really it's the same thing we're talking about. I think we need to accept that. But I absolutely say that it needs to come back to this committee for us to be really comfortable with what's happening. So I'm happy with that safeguard to propose this change, and I think 4 and 5 are not, we don't need to debate. But on the proviso that it comes back here again, that we can accept this, and we do mean that no further demolition works shall take place. And I think we also need to be mindful that it may be, depending on what comes to us and what the state of further debates are, that we may want to be talking about a partial demolition so that it can be a partial rebuild rather than a whole. And I think it would be useful if officers took that away as a thought to consider. Because, for example, if the car park needs to go and we can build a hotel there, before we've got funding for doing the other elements, then we should be happy for that partial demolition rather than the whole demolition. And we would need to consider how that could be happening. Because what we have at the moment visually is okay, but a whole might not be, to see the backs of other buildings.
Thanks, Lucy.
Chair, I think to move matters on, I would like to support the issue as Lucy outlined a few moments ago. This matter must be brought back, and I think we've already had that assurance. Mm-hmm. Thank you for the explanation on what this report is. I did find it confusing, but I have to say now I am reassured, as I think you are, Chair. I'd like to move to the vote with the additions made by Councillor Kerr earlier. Thank you.
I'm more than happy with that. So all those in favour of the application as it is with Councillor Kerr's amendments, all those in favour?
7, Chair.
7. Any against? 3. 4. That application is carried. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your discussions. We now move on to item 9, potential future site visits. Is that you, Ian?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. No problem, thank you.
I'm on screen, James. Yeah, thank you. There you go. That's near James's house. If you want to go and visit it, it's Hollybrook Way, Little Owen.
Get the tea on, James.
Thank you. Osmaston Road, It's just a variation of condition, Chair.
No.
Fairly prominent site there, Chair. Sir Frank Whittle Road.
fine,
Yep. Not sure what that proposal is, James. Is it?
Derby College.
Yeah.
Railway.
Yeah. Just not sure what the proposal is, Chair. Can't remember.
Two-storey extension.
Oh, it's an extension, Chair. Beg your pardon. Yeah. Thank you, James. Yeah. Yeah. First of two, Rolls-Royce redevelopment schemes. No. Okay. Thank you, James. Variation of condition. It's on a range of goods issue, not particularly stimulating. Sorry, Richard. This scheme we've just been talking about.
Outline plan commission for
There you are, 26000042. You can go on e-planning tonight and look at all the documents.
I think we know where that is.
Yes. And another variation of condition on trigger points, Chair.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thanks, everyone. See you next month.
Thank you, Chair.
Good night.
Oh, 10 to. Jenny said. Jenny said quarter to.
Close.
She talked a bit longer to drag it out a bit.
Yeah. Jenny did drag it out.
She dragged it out a bit, didn't she?